Hey everyone, and welcome to Ricky's Rockin Reviews. This is the first book tag I'm doing. I curated some questions because I thought it would be cool to just answer some questions and let you guys know a little bit more about me and my reading history and what I look forward to and stuff like that. So this is Rockin Book Tag Volume 1. So without further ado, what was the first impactful book in your life? So growing up, I always was around like the Magic Treehouse books. I was also really into dinosaurs, so I would pick up any dinosaur book that I can get my hands on, whether it be a book that was in my reading level or, giant encyclopedias. But really the first impactful book that I still remember when my dad picked up this book for us. We were at the store, it's The Thief of Always by Clive Barker, and this is the actual book that he got us. And my dad read this to us, me and my sister, when we were growing up. And he would read a couple chapters a night, and I was captivated. This is a really awesome book, but I just hold the memories of this book real dearly. As an adult, I reread this last year, and I read it in the evening. Now, what's really cool is that this is an awesome cover. They don't make covers like this anymore. But the book itself, the story is pretty dark, and you only get a little bit of a flavor of that on the back. This is the holiday house. It looks very ominous there. What's really cool is that I was actually able to find another edition of it, or at least I think it's the first edition. This is the hardcover version of The Thief of Always from 1992. The book I just showed you is from like 2002 or something like that. So here we have really incredible artwork, and it looks way more sinister. We have the main character in the back, big old H there for Harvey, I believe, and it has wraparound covers. That looks really cool. And there's also illustrations throughout, like so. And what's really cool is that this is all original art by Clive Barker himself. So moving on to question number 2, why did you start this channel? So I started this channel because I really enjoy other people talking about books, and I kind of wanted to talk about books myself, especially books that I don't see a lot on YouTube. For example, right behind me, there's a ton of Marvel prose books. I like to collect those so much, especially the ones from the 90s. That's when they really started to take off, and they're actually really good. And I don't really see anybody talking about them, which is ironic because since I've created this channel, I haven't really spoken about any of these. I've posted some reviews on Instagram, but I should definitely do more. And just to pick up some random ones here on the back, see what they. So this is Spider-Man and Iron Man teaming up in a trilogy called Doomsday. This is part 2. And here's the first one where he teams up with the Hulk. And these books just are an incredible time capsule back to this like unmatched era in comics where the art was always phenomenal, and they just don't make them like this anymore. And the adventures translate really well into these mass trade paperbacks. It's just I love reading these. It's so cool. All the technology is out of date, and their ideas about what futuristic technology would be like is kind of humorous sometimes. But ironically, I need to make more videos about stuff like this. But I wanted to see videos about books that I've read or the books that I enjoy. And so that's why I made this channel. So question number 3 is, what got you into reading? So what got me into reading is that I'm a daydreamer, and I like escapism. I think it's very important. And I feel that books are unparalleled when it comes to the amount of escapism you can find in there. I would always get dropped off at Borders while my parents did shopping at the mall. And I would just spend so much time near the comic book section and towards these Marvel books. And here's one of these purchases that I made at Borders when I was a kid. This is Spider-Man Sinister Six Combo, which collects 2 books in the trilogy, actually book 2 and 3. And I didn't find that out till later. Look how chunky that is. It collects 2 books in here. It's kind of like an omnibus. And good news, I actually have the one to begin it all. I just got it like after all these years. This one's pretty hard to find, and finally got one. It's called Gathering of the Sinister Six. Anyways, that's what got me into reading, and there was a huge slump in reading from when I was a kid to when I got, a girlfriend, and she became my fiance, and we got married, and we were going to college and all that. So huge slump in reading. But now that I'm kind of situated, have my house and everything, I'm definitely reading a lot more, and I'm loving it. Question number 4 is, where do I like to read? I love to read in the kitchen. We have our kitchen and dining room's kind of connected, and so I just sit on the dining room table where we eat. I make sure my area is clean because I love to keep my books in like pristine condition, and I'll have coffee in the morning, or even in the evening sometimes. After catching up with my wife and stuff, I'll sit down and I'll read for an hour or an hour and a half, and it's just my peace. I love reading in there. I can't really read sitting in the bed or anywhere else. I like a nice flat table, a nice sturdy chair. So that's where I like to read. And I read in my man cave too sometimes, when it comes to my comic books and my omnibuses and my trade paperback collected editions of comics. I have a special desk in my room, in my man cave, where I like to read those giant, just massive books. There's no way I'm bringing them, from outside back into this house. Way too valuable. The opportunity to damage them is way too high, or the risk, I should say, way too high. So I like to read up there. But this library is where I keep all my paperbacks and hardcovers of traditional novels. Which brings me to the next question, number 5, paperback versus hardcover. Now this might be a little bit controversial because the presentation of a hardback is unmatched. They look really pretty, and when you take off the dust jacket, if you want to show them naked, like my wife says, look at that. It looks gorgeous. And hardcovers are awesome. But I don't think anything compares to a paperback. And even the mass paperbacks are kind of my favorite. They're, they derive from the era of the pulpy books, and there's just something so charming about them to me. And in order for a book to remain this pristine, you got to care for it. And I care for all of the things that I own. If you're going to own something, you got to care for it. And I just love the way they look, and I love the way they feel. They're lighter, and they're just more comfortable in my hands. Like literally, I can open it up, and there's no discomfort in my hand whatsoever. When it comes to a hardcover, that's the downside for me, because if I'm holding open a book, this part of the hardcover that's kind of like resting in between your I think it's the index finger and your thumb, kind of just rest there in that area, and after a while it gets really uncomfortable, really heavy. It can even be painful sometimes, depending on how heavy your book is. So I get excited for paperbacks, and I even mention to people sometimes, I'm like, hey, you realize that the paperbacks are the versions that come out after the hardcover. They're saving the best for last. And a lot of times, if you don't believe me, if you look on Amazon, a lot of the times the paperbacks are more expensive than the hardcovers. So there's something to it. But that's just my preference. I love both, but paperback is my favorite way to read something. Definitely presentation wise, when you have them on the shelf, hardcover is great. But I collect both, so I'm getting the best of both worlds. Question number 6. Do you read more relatively popular books or more underrated books? So I tend to read a mixture of the two. I like to read a lot of subgenres, and whatever's popular in the subgenre is not necessarily popular to, mass audiences. Like, for example, The Har by David Sodergren. This is a book that's become really popular online, like body horror and stuff like that. What I'm trying to say is that a lot of what I read, you won't find it on a Goodreads list, of best of the year. A lot of the times when I'm looking at the Goodreads, nominees for best of the year and the winners and everything like that, there's only a few books that I've read per year that actually appear on that list. So I would say I read a lot of underrated things, and my goal with this channel is to bring a lot of awareness and attention to smaller authors. And I mean, I've always been like that. I've always kind of gravitated towards things that aren't as popular, but for sure, when it comes to like all-time classics and the things you just keep hearing from, every year there's just really popular books that everyone reads, like The Measure last year. Or we have some authors that, just really take off, like Grady Hendrix and Riley Sager. Those two appeared on my top 10 list of last year. Question number 7, are you a mood reader or a TBR reader? So that's kind of interesting because I'm primarily a mood reader. I buy so many books. There's a lot more books that appear behind me. There are a lot more books behind me than appear on the camera. I have a huge collection, I would say, and I buy them when I like to buy the books, when I hear about them and I get really excited for them, and I like to have them on my shelf. And when it comes to choosing a new book, that's one of my favorite parts about finishing a book, is that I have like so many choices to read the next book, and that's always fun. It's just whatever I'm feeling, I'll come to my shelves and I'll be like, you know what, I'm really feeling this. But lately I've been actually doing a lot of reviews for authors, so I have like some stacks of books that I need to get to, and it's been really cool. I have a structure and I have a goal to finish these books in a timely manner, so that's been fun. I should mention I have a review coming out soon over The Bad Memories of Buzzard Hill by Corey Andrews, collection of short stories. Really awesome. I can't wait to talk about it, so catch that video soon. But I also have other books that I need to read, like The Taxidermied Man by J.C. Morris, Killing the Cult by J.C. Morris. I love the thickness of this one and the way it feels and the artwork there. Awesome. Intelligent Dinosaur Theory by Roland Ritter, which is like awakening all this love of dinosaurs inside me. And I even went out on eBay and I scored a pretty good deal on a really nice Jurassic Park paperback from Michael Crichton. So there's that one. And Metaxism by R.E. Holding from Cliff Cave Books. I can't wait to get to this one. This is a science experiment gone wrong. Lovecraftian with definitely some horror elements in there, and some mystery like clue. That's what it says on the back, at least. So can't wait to get to those. What I'm trying to say is I have a structure now. But when I get done with this batch, I want to kind of read some of my other stuff that I have here. And I'll just kind of, intersperse my reviews that way. Number 8 is a fun one. What's the last book you recommended to someone? All right, so my boss at work, she found out that I like to read, and she likes to read too, and I recommended some books to her, and I made them sound really good. Like I have this one back here called Where the Forest Meets the Stars, which is kind of like it's a romance, like family drama type deal. And I really like this book. I read it when I was in Alaska, and so I was telling her about this book, and she loved the idea of it. She ended up reading it from her library, and she just loved it. So after that, she was taking a lot of my reading recommendations, and I recommended her the Finlay Donovan series, and she read all that too. But then I recommended This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno, and after that, after that book, she hasn't asked me for any more recommendations. That's a hardcore, that's kind of like a hardcore horror book. And after, like I said, she hasn't asked me about my books after that, really. That's a phenomenal book, by the way. It covers grief in a way that I've never read before. Really effective stuff. But anyways, that's what comes to my memory when I think about that question. But of course, all the things that I'm reviewing here, like Quest Off by Justin Vert, and the stuff by Brian Boyer here, of course, like everything that I'm reviewing here, I'm reviewing it because I'm recommending it to anyone who wants to watch. Number 9, buying books versus borrowing books. So, like I said, I have a really extensive backlog, and when I really like a book and I get just enamored with the cover or the idea of the book and the way it looks when I see other people's videos, like physically in hand, I feel like I have to have them. And that's how I like to, with the money that me and my wife give ourselves, you know, we have a budget for each month. That's how I like to spend my money, is on books. But I definitely borrow books as well from the library. And it's actually really convenient because sometimes when I can't find a book physically, I can always use Libby. I can get books directly from my Kindle from libraries that I'm subscribed to around the country. So I do a bit of both, but I've been telling myself I should probably not visit the library so much if I have all these books behind me that I gotta get to. So mixture of both. Question number 10, do I read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? So I tend to read it over a series of days or a couple of days. You know, during the work week, it gets kind of hectic. I try to read every night, but some nights I can't, so I'll skip a day or two. But on the weekends, I dedicate a lot of my weekend to reading. When I'm not spending time with family or with my wife, that's what I'm usually doing. And I don't have this like urge to finish a book in one day. I like to savor them. I actually really like to savor the books. So it's really nice to look forward to getting back into a particular world for a few nights of the week. Question number 11, do you read multiple books at once? So this is really interesting. I was always about adhering to reading one book at a time. And that is definitely my preference. So last year I joined a book club at work, and I was also, you know, checking out a lot of books from the library. It was around the first times where I was visiting the library where I live now, and so I was excited. So I got a bunch of library books, and they were coming due. So I had my personal reading, I had my book club meeting, and then I had my library books that were coming due. So I was reading a lot at once, and I figured out that I could kind of handle it. But my preference is to read one at a time. But now that I have my Kindle, I've had it for about 1.5 years, or maybe 2 years now. When I have a library book on my Kindle, or if I happen to have an ARC on there, I will read those when I'm in bed. Because I have an ability to read comfortably in bed now with my Kindle, I think it's almost impossible to read in bed when it comes to like a paperback. Just because of the lighting, and I'm sharing the space with my wife, and if she's watching her videos or you know, she's talking to her mom or something on the phone, it can get kind of distracting, which I do have headphones for that. But it all comes down to lighting a lot, and also posture. You know, laying down to read a book and having to hold it up is pretty tough. So long story short, I usually reading one book at a time in physical form, and if I have a book on my Kindle or on my Kindle app, I'll be reading that like during the wee hours of the night when I'm in bed. Question number 12 is, what is your favorite book? So my favorite book, it doesn't even really come into question, is The East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I consider him my favorite author because of this tremendous achievement. This is a beautiful, beautiful story. I have to make a separate video about everything I love about this book. To sum it up, it's essentially a retelling of the book of Genesis in modern times, when this book was written. And the themes, the characters, the lessons learned in here is just absolutely phenomenal. And I even remember this being Not only is this my favorite book, this is probably one of my favorite reading experiences as well. I read this when I was on vacation in the Bahamas. We were sitting on the beach or by the poolside, and I was just fully immersed into this like over 6 or almost 600-page book. And it has these edges right here that are all different sizes or different lengths, and I forget what that's called, but I just love when a book has that. It gives it a really nice texture in between your thumbs. This feeling is, I love that feeling. But yeah, East of Eden by John Steinbeck is my favorite book of all time. Question number 13, how often do you read? Like I said, I try to read every day. If I have something going on, like Christmas or birthday party, and I have to run errands, stuff like that, all that stuff gets in the way of my reading. How dare that get in the way of my reading? But I try to read every day. Number 14, what is your favorite genre? So behind me, immediately behind me, you see all these superhero books that I have, and on the 2 levels above me, it's all superhero books. But also below me, like right here, I have a collection of H.P. Lovecraft and all these kinds of old horror stories over here in these paperbacks, which are really cool. I should show you some. So this is Ghost Stories by Henry James. Check that out. Oh my gosh. I love this little collection. Anyways, all below me is 3 shelves of horror. So I love horror, and I love, the action adventure that comes from the superhero stuff. And I've been reading a lot of horror recently, and I think the reason is because the suspense and this natural intrigue and morbid curiosity is what just keeps me reading, and I tend to gravitate towards that, especially recently. But all my preferences come in waves. I'm having like a really strong desire to get back into literature, which I have more on this side up here. So I'll be, weaving in and out of genres, but horror and action adventure, when it comes to like comic book and superheroes, are my favorite. Number 15, what do you wish more books would have? Now, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting question. I feel like a lot of people can answer in different ways. I can't wait to see how other people will answer this question. But for me, what I really like to see in a book is when the different chapters have actual titles. I think that's far more interesting than just seeing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on and on. I love when an author has the creativity to come up with an interesting title for a chapter, and that piques my interest so much. I'm like, especially like I said, when the title is really creative and kind of out there, it makes you think like, oh, what am I gonna step into in this next chapter? I love that. So I wish more books had that. Now I see how it can get you out of a groove. Now that I think about it, if I'm reading a suspense novel that has like a really quick pace and chapters that are on the shorter side, I guess it wouldn't make sense to have chapter titles. Now that I think about it, it would just kind of break apart the momentum. But for other books, I think it's very appropriate. It could be very appropriate. But that's just me. I like interesting chapter titles. That's my thing. Question number 16. What is a book you think should be taught in schools? So I read this book a while ago called Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. It's essentially a memoir or autobiography of this man who tragically was in a car accident, and it left him paralyzed or partially paralyzed, and all he could do is draw. And he discovered drawing as a way to cope with the pain of not being able to move and the depression that would set in. And he also sadly got into alcohol, and it kind of disrupted his life. And it's just an incredibly interesting story. It's kind of a sad story, but it's also really uplifting because he ends up finding this natural talent to draw and to use sarcasm and to be, really humorous in his drawings. And he would write for papers and magazines, and he ended up finding a tremendous amount of success with his cartoons. And this is a real life person, and the book itself, the story, everything feels very real and raw. So I know this is kind of a difficult subject when it comes to schools and them requiring reading. I think it's really important for students to find their own books for themselves that speak to them, and that they can enjoy reading themselves, and that feeling of choice is really important. So I think it should be definitely encouraged, but at the same time, book requirements are also a good thing because they culture the students in a sense. And there's some classic literature that I feel like everyone should read. And but if I had a choice, it would be this book. Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. The title of the book is essentially the punchline to a cartoon that he drew. And like I said, I feel like it's something that kids would actually enjoy. It would actually teach a lot of lessons. The rawness of it will keep students engaged, and I think that's the most important thing. So I would really like to see, now that's a really good question, I would really like to see that book become a little bit more popular. And there's also a film directed by Gus Van Sant that stars Joaquin Phoenix as this man, co-starring Jonah Hill and Rooney Mara and Jack Black, and it's a really good movie too. But the book itself is wonderful. Question number 17. What are a few books you want to read this year? So I have a little bit of a stack here of what I want to read. So when I went to Portugal with my wife a few years ago, Portugal's a beautiful place, by the way. When we went, we visited the bookstore that inspired the staircases in Harry Potter. There's a long line to get in there, but it was really worth it. And I bought this version of Dracula, or this edition of Dracula with the gilded edges on it. I'm sure it's not, exclusive to Portugal, but I have this great memory in this book, and I've always wanted to get into Dracula, and I've always wanted to read this book, and it's been sitting on my shelf for quite a while. And me being a big fan of horror, it's a shame I haven't read it, so I really want to get to this one this year, and it's going to be a priority for sure. And along with that is Frankenstein, another classic horror by Mary Shelley, and this is one that I've been dragging my feet on. I really need to read this. And I also have an exciting project that kind of goes in line with these two, which I will reveal later. There's also this duology of books, if you will, that kind of goes into a sci-fi realm, but also it goes into asking kind of some religious and important questions, by Mary Doria Russell. And it's The Sparrow and Children of God. So I heard about these books and I was like, sign me up. So what happens when we come into contact with extraterrestrial life? Does that change what we thought about our history? Does it change what we thought about our religion? Those are big questions. I can't wait to see how the author tackles these ideas. I've heard that these are classic books, and it's just right up my alley. I've always loved any idea of aliens and questioning what is out there. I'm also a Catholic and a spiritual guy, a man of faith. So I'm really excited to see. And I also really want to read the biography of Edvard Munch from Norway. And this is a biography by Sue Prideaux. And it's a chunkster. You get a lot of depth into him, and he's my favorite artist. The Scream is my favorite painting. I went to Norway last year, dream come true with my wife, and I got to see it in person, and I'm just so in love with the painting and the artist. I love his poems and the things he would write about in his journal. He has some really beautiful quotes, and I just can't wait to know more about him. So that's why I really want to read this biography. And if I get a chance, I really want to read The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I've been listening to him a lot on podcasts, and I just love the idea of his books. He has quite a few books on seduction, mastery, and the laws of human nature. He just came out with the 25-year anniversary version of 48 Laws of Power, which is a beautiful, leather-bound black version, which is kind of expensive, and I'm kind of waiting for that one to go down in price. But once it does, and if I'm able to get it sometime this year, that's going to kick off my Robert Greene reading, and I can't wait to dive into that. Question number 18, do you listen to anything while you read? So I like it to be completely silent. It helps me focus, it helps me picture everything that I'm reading, it helps me hallucinate essentially. And if I have like loud noises or conversation in the background, it's really disrupting, which is why even when I find some like time in public to read, it turns out a lot of times I can't because there's too much in the background happening. So if anything, in order for me to cancel out all that stuff, I'll put my headphones on and I'll listen to white noise. And that's essentially the only thing that I really listen to when I read. Question number 19. What future releases are you looking forward to? So Justin Vert has the Quest Off book and he plans to release the sequel soon. So I can't wait to get my hands on that. Corey Andrews is also working on a Bad Memories of Buzzard Hill sequel, which he's hard at work at right now. I know that Brian Boyer also has a backlog of books that need to come out. I know that Robert Greene is also coming out with a book over the sublime, which is a book that deals with life and death and this overarching principle that we're all a part of. A lot of times we can take our life for granted and we have this like feeling like everything that we do and our future plans are infinite, but really there's a finality. There's a finality to everything. And what does that mean for us? Does that kick us into high gear and, make us, try to achieve our dreams because we only have a limited time on this earth? And we shouldn't be wasting our time not impacting people in a positive way. So that book seems like it's going to be a really powerful one. And last but not least, question number 20. Does book condition matter to you? I kind of alluded to that a little earlier. It definitely does. I know there's a saying that, a book is well loved when you see like creases down the middle of the spine and it's kind of dog-eared and, there's like chips on the corners missing. And there's also books that have a little bit of water damage on them, or you see like a little bit of mold buildup and stuff like that. Or like coffee stains or like pasta sauce stains and stuff like that. I'm not about that. That sounds like you're abusing your books. But that's just me. So when I go out and I like go to used bookstores, I try to find the best version. If there's a book that I've really been looking for and I find it and it's like not in the best quality, I'll leave it. I'll wait for another one. I spend a lot of time shopping for my books on eBay, and sometimes there'll be a part of a lot, and so if it's like if I consider the book kind of like a bonus book or something I'm taking a chance on, but I'm really going after other books in a lot, I'll gladly accept that book. But most of my books here look really good. Now guys, thank you so much for subscribing and commenting and liking my videos. It was really fun to put this together and let you guys know a little bit more about me. I would love for anyone to grab these questions. I'll put them down here in the description and answer these questions yourself, either in the comments or if you'd like to make a video. And I'd also like to tag Black Sun and Narcotic Undertow to answer these questions as well, because I would really like to see how you guys would answer these questions. I feel like you guys will have really interesting responses and I can't wait to get the discussion going. So guys, if you really enjoy watching my reviews and my videos on interesting topics or my sit downs with authors, please subscribe, also like, comment, and share. I can't wait to hear from you guys. See ya.